and sets aside for affordable housing. And the essence of doing this on public land is again to reduce the cost of land, because one of the reasons why houses have remained unaffordable is the cost of land. So if the land is free and the money you're using to construct these houses is taxpayers' money, and then these houses are not free, they are for sale. So we have two sources of revenue for this fund. There's a levy that builds these houses, but then when you take these houses, then there is money that is paid for these houses. So that means that this is going to be one of the largest funds we have in the country. Because remember, all the other funds that you have, whether it's a catering fund, you charge the fund, you expense, the money is depleted. This is like initial seed capital. You put into the housing projects, you take those houses, you recoup that money back into the fund. That means in the next several years, then you might actually not have to levy again, because now you'll have created an enough pool of resources that is sufficient to continue with bridging the housing agenda in the country. Secondly, what this program by government has done, it has signaled the market into finding more efficient ways of providing affordable housing to the public. And you've seen a lot of private developers now coming up and saying this is affordable housing program, and you've seen market prices of houses going low. In 2018, a two-bed apartment in Kilelesho or Lavington would cost you no less than 17 million shillings. Now, every day now, you pass around Kilelesho and Lavington, you see ads of apartments, two-bedroom apartments going for 5 million, for 6 million shillings that are built by the private sector. So the signaling that Kenya is going to, that we have a 200,000 units deficit of housing units in the country, and the government is coming to bridging and saying it has sent a signaling effect to the private sector that are now coming into this investment. And therefore, I'm seeing in the long run, the government will not have again to engage in this and this program. We have just to be self-financing and now let the private sector continue with it. In fact, a part of the provisions that we've provided, Schedule 3 on this bill was who are going to be the implementing agencies. And one of the implementing agencies now there has been stipulated as the private sector. A lot of Kenyans are also asking, why not allocate appropriate money from the national budget and do this affordable housing units? And that is a genuine, really concern by Kenyans. But Latif, let me tell you, out of the 10 shillings that we collect as revenue, out of 10 shillings that KRA collects every day, 7 of those shillings goes to pay national debt. 7 out of 10 goes to pay national. In fact, it is 6.7 shillings. So you have left with 3.3 shillings for development and for recurrent expenditures. Out of that, 2 shillings is for recurrent. It's for paying salary of civil servants, for sending books for our primary school children, for maintaining our police service, for maintaining our armies and all that. So we are left with hardly a shilling for development. That would mean that we probably take another 50 years for us to have the kind of resources that are needed to bridge the 200,000 housing units deficit we have in this republic.
Much more, I have an issue with Parliament, though.
Okay.
And my big problem with Parliament is, in what I would, without fear of contradiction, say is failure. When the issue of housing bill was being discussed, it was a public debate before the Finance Act, before the finance bill even went into proper debate in the House. This issue of finance bill was being discussed. And one of the things that I remember even the PS Hinga saying is, we will not start collecting money from this housing until we have regulations in place, until we have a framework for managing this money in place. One would expect that would be obvious to members of Parliament, particularly those sitting in the Finance Committee or the Budget Committee, because if you are collecting money for a specific need, you have got to ring-fence that money so that it doesn't go to pay salaries and buy mandazi. You failed us because you approved the levy without approving or demanding that a framework comes first before you approve a levy.
Okay.
And it had to take a Kenyan to go to court to raise this matter, among others, for Parliament to see, oh, yes, my God, yeah.
There are some loopholes here.
We were supposed to have done this.
Yes, Latif, I knew that we needed to create an additional legal framework. And part of the remedy that we did, as we waited to create time now to bring that legislative framework, was, again, if you check the finance bill as it came to Parliament and the Finance Act, there's a big difference on section, if I'm right, section 34A and B, that we said previously it was there's going to be a 3%, actually it was 3% housing levy, 3% employer, 3% employee. We reduced it to 1.5% employer, 1.5% employee. But most importantly, and remember this amendment was brought by the MP for Machakos, which as the chair of the committee I agreed to, and we supported in the House and it was approved. We said that these monies will only be spent for the purpose of affordable housing and proper sanitation and the required infrastructure. That is in the Finance Act. Mm-hmm. And what that amendment did, it singled out the housing levy from the other taxes that are proposed by the Finance Act to the framework that existed before this annulling by the court was KRA collects it. It is put in a special account at Central Bank of Kenya, only for the purpose of which is stipulated in the Finance Act. Construction, offtake of affordable housing units and the required infrastructure, including roads and sanitation.
Was that
provision
was that sufficient?
Is there. On whether it's sufficient or not is a subject of court of legal interpretation.
No, in your opinion.
In my
having
opinion,
that clause there that
in
says
opinion,
this money doesn't even go, it goes to the central bank and it can only be used to build houses. But it does not tell the central bank or the controller of budget how to make sure that this money is actually going to build houses. If a minister, if we abolish the Ministry of Housing and the Department for Housing was under something else called Environment, and someone in the Ministry of Environment came and said, we are building houses for KFS officers, would the controller of budget have said, no, I cannot approve this withdrawal? Because the word housing would have been there, and time, sanitation would have been there.
At that time, Latif, that was sufficient to the judgment of the committee members, the judgment of National Assembly, to the judgment of all our legal teams, and the thinking that national members of Parliament work by themselves.
Mheshimiwa, you just started this conversation this morning by saying, actually, we have experience as Parliament. We have a petroleum development levy. There's a law. We have, which other levies did you talk about?
The road maintenance levy.
Yes, road maintenance levy. There's a law to manage it. We have this catering levy. There's a law to manage it. You had experience knowing for us to establish this catering levy, we need to anchor it in law. But you're telling us that your experience came and told you that no, we don't need a law for this one. No. We just need a clause for this one.
Gentlemen and lady, knowledge is something that gets to evolve. You get to learn something today and you improve that you're learning tomorrow. And the thinking that particular time was that was sufficient, and that will buy us time to bring the legislative framework, which started drafting immediately. And that is why, even before the annulling of this by the court, because the final annulling was done at the end of January, we stopped collecting in 1st of January. The affordable housing bill was tabled last year. So even when we said this will suffice for now, but we got to have a legislative framework, and we sent our drafters on their toes to start. Now, can we have now that legislative proposal to be brought before?
So what was the urgency? In the end, practically, this program will begin from around May, June. Yes.
What was the urgency?
What was the urgency? Why couldn't you, first of all, bring the housing bill and then bring the affordable housing levy in the next financial year?
We have now, for example, at least 210 housing units being done in 196 constituencies across the country.
Has our money been used on that?
Yes.
Has the housing levy been used?
That is a housing levy that was That is a housing levy.
So this money is already being used.
Of course, yes. You know, once
You don't
two
see-
things
you-
happen.
You don't see a problem there, Mheshimiwa.
What is the problem?
You are using the money illegally.
How?
The money shouldn't have been collected in the first place. If everything that ought to have been done was done, I find this puzzling. You have a good thing, and then you know what needs to be done. It is not done. And then everything is supposed to follow. Now, look at the bad press you get. Look at the baggage that comes with it. All unnecessary. And yet all this could have been done simply by doing what was needed to be done in the first place.
Muga, I dare tell you that any time there has always been a revolutionary idea and a change, it is never welcome. And that is the nature of human being. Even if we took a year or two, when you want to introduce something new, it is not welcome. Some of the programs that you've seen, let's talk about the National Social Protection Fund, the engineering of NHIF. We've had a lot of debate about it. We are questioning it. And of course, it has been challenged in court. When it gets to work, then people are saying, "Oh, okay, I think this was a good thing." When the Social Protection Fund for elderly people was started in this country, there was out of saying, "Why are we giving people money for free? Why are we giving these elderly people money for free?" Talk about the new constitution, a very, very progressive document. We were split in the middle as a country. Devolution. We were told devolution is Majimboism. And
By the way, it is
Majimboism then.
It was demonized.
Majimboism then, especially people from my community who were told this is Majimbo, and Majimbo is associating with the right honorable Raila Odinga, was a terrible thing. So
It's a power grab.
if we have something that we are saying now, we are really celebrating a very progressive constitution. But during that constitutional moment, we were split right in the middle.
But
And you know what we did not do?
Yes.
We did not introduce the constitution through the back door.
No.
We followed due process.
What have we introduced in the back door?
This levy
How is it in the back door?
without a legal framework.
I mean, surely, Mheshimiwa.
Why
Okay.
is the law following the money?
Let's
It's-
ask the question right now because we keep going back and forth. It's a yes or no. Is there a legal framework for the implementation of the housing levy today? It's either there or it's not.
We have, what do you call it? We have a vote for it at the State Department of Housing. The money is ring-fenced in terms of you cannot, the control of budget cannot approve those monies for payment of salaries or for nothing else apart from what is pronounced in the Finance Act and what is pronounced in the Appropriations Act. Because the Appropriations Act created a specific vote for this particular purpose. And, gentlemen and lady, this information is progressive now. And the role of the independent arms of government, because if the courts did not pronounce themselves on this particular matter, we would not be having this conversation. The program will be ongoing. And that is why, in the wisdom of the Constitution, because no particular institution is said to have the island of knowledge, that you do this work, legislation, you execute as the executive, judiciary interpret. And you've had judicial interpretations even on our Constitution over and over and over again. So, an example, if you the oldest constitution of this world is the Constitution of the United States of America.
So the
And
answer
yet
is
there's
no,
still-
Mheshimiwa, that there is no legal framework. What there is a plan in order to institute a legal framework after the fact. And I think that we can just agree on, isn't it? So that has come later. And so the question continues to be, when we talk about representation from Parliament of the people, which is in many cases first charge, what guarantee do you give to Kenyans futurely that it is their interests that you represent first, as opposed to the interests of the executive for which heads your party? And we cannot say that, call it perception, call it optics, but it plays very squarely in this conversation, and we cannot run away from that. Futurely, because this, many would say they've thrown up their arms, it's a done deal. And they cannot run away from the power that you wield in Parliament or to whom you are beholden. So what guarantees, and I'm really, really concerned about this, what guarantees do you give to Kenyans that truly it is their interests? The Kenyans who are crying today about not being able to afford school fees, the Kenyans who are crying today that they cannot afford a meal, the Kenyans who are crying that they paid power bills and they can't get power, they paid power installation fees and they can't get power. The Kenyans who go to hospital tomorrow and cannot get medicine. And here we are saying, take a little bit more from Kenyans and build houses for them. Okay. Mheshimiwa, how do you say tomorrow that truly will represent the needs of people? I feel like crying because Kenyans are asking that question. And here we are talking about building houses and Kenyans are wondering, do you really know? Do you really know where I am? That's what Kenyans are asking today.
No. The issue of loyalty between the loyalty to the people and loyalty to the party. And I think that is the most critical question that you've asked. We went to campaign to the people. And you have a choice to choose a political party. And Kenyans elect not just the individual, but they elect your political vehicle. And if you doubt it, tell me any UDA member of parliament that was elected in, say, Nyanza region, where Raila Odinga got the highest number of votes. Or tell me someone who got elected on an ODM ticket, even when there were those candidates, where President William Ruto and Deputy President Gachagua led in the number of votes. The reality of politics and political parties is true. Because I went to the same car, to the same rally with President Ruto and Deputy President Gachagua and said that we have a plan of how to do affordable housing units in this country. The people that were campaigning on the other side, as Azimio, went on that platform. And therefore, even though you are required to exercise your oversight roles, the truth is political realities of your political party, you have to take in consideration of that. And let me give an example. The position I hold as the chair of Finance Committee of the National Assembly is not an Azimio position. And that is a reality.
It's a Kenya Kwanza position.
It is a Kenya Kwanza position. And therefore, I am mandated by my party to execute also my party's manifesto. And that is what you'll have a choice to choose in the next election. Because unlike say the judiciary or some, especially the judiciary arm of government, the executive, especially the presidency and the members of parliament, every 5 years, we go back to the people.
And you're answerable.
And I'm answerable. So I'll be answerable. In 2017, I was elected on a Jubilee ticket. I went back and said, elect me back on this is what we agreed to do. Did we do it? Even 2027, I'll go back to my people. And they will have a chance to choose. Did I do what I promised them to do?
Let me tell you
something. And that is the power of the democracy of the Republic of Kenya.
I agree to a great extent. But then, your job, even in this political formation, is to make sure that things are done the right way.
Yes.
Okay? That's the job you're given. The job of the president is to make sure the country is run the right way. The job of the member of parliament is to make sure that the president is running the country the right way. That's the job that you have.
Yeah.
And when you feel that the president is cutting corners, it is your job to stop him in his tracks and tell him, you are cutting corners and this is not lawful. So when you approve a fund and you don't have a framework for it, you're failing in your job. This is not the Kenya Kwanza. This is not all those things. It is your job to make sure that Kenya Kwanza delivers on its campaign promise, but following due process. It's your job to make sure that public participation happens properly. It's your job to make sure that if you come up with a new legislative framework, it shall be done in accordance with the law. It's your job to make sure that the executive does not go on a borrowing spree without answering to parliament, or on a spending spree without answering to Parliament. You can't come and tell us, you see, Kenya Kwanza promised, if, let's say, Azimio had won, and Raila was the president, and he had promised 6,000, you can't tell us that MPs would have sat down and say, Raila anataka pesa ngapi? 6,000. Alisema wache iende. It was their job, plus you who would be in that parliament today, to make sure that due process is followed in the expenditure of this money. This is what we're having an issue with Parliament. If Parliament does not tell the executive, no, we shall follow due process and not political expediency.
Let me give an example of what happened because I was in the last Parliament, and I'll compare that to what is happening now. I've given an example. I don't know why you are all not
remembering.
You're conveniently forgetting.
Remind us the example.
Out of the affordable housing bill, for example. Let me start with the finance bill. The finance bill that was tabled in Parliament, and that is in the Finance Act, has had 110 amendments. Those amendments are not brought by the executive. This affordable housing bill, is fundamentally different in terms of its structure from what was brought by the executive. I have just told you that we have 49 new amendments and new clauses on this bill. That was not done by the executive. Next week, for example, we've received a petition from one of the members of Parliament on the loans that are given to border people. You know, you have a creditor, a businessman or company comes and says, I'm going to give you a border, you're going to pay 200 shillings a month, 200 shillings a day, and then you sign. By the time we are completing to pay for that bike, you've paid 350,000 shillings.
Yes, you
more
have.
than twice.
Thrice even.
More than thrice the amount of money. And interestingly, just when you're about to complete, ukichelewa na siku ngapi, your bike is taken. Some of those people, instead of now the business of lending, they are in the business of selling the bikes
collecting them.
to Kenyans and collecting them.
And
what we're doing as a committee of Finance and National Assembly from next week is we're going to get to the middle of it and make sure that those loans that are given to border riders, for example, must adhere to interest rates, and they must adhere to a particular law, and we must make sure that those border people are protected.
Can I say
Is
something,
that the work
Mheshimiwa?
executive? No.
Okay.
That is the independent role of National Assembly.
Mheshimiwa.
And the initiative
Final
of the chair of the
comment,
Finance
City.
National
You know,
Time is up.
we actually agree with everything you're saying. We may not seem to remember or understand certain things, but neither do you. Our point of difference is not what you're saying. It is on process and procedure and the right thing to do. That's it. Everything else you say we agree with.
We'll do better.